Tánaiste, my question is in regards to the ongoing slaughter in Gaza, and have you or your administration had any contact with the American ambassador here or Joe Biden in terms of the continuing arming of Israel in terms of their absolute genocide in Gaza?
As we approach the 10th month of the conflict in Gaza, the utmost priority remains the need for immediate ceasefire, the release of hostages held by Hamas in Gaza, and full, safe and unhindered humanitarian access. I welcome the three-phase ceasefire plan outlined by President Biden at the beginning of this month, and this has since been endorsed by the UN Security Council in UN Security Council Resolution 2735. The need for the international community, including the European Union, to exert meaningful pressure on all parties to accept and implement the term of UN Security Council Resolution 2735 was a key focus of my discussions with my EU counterparts earlier this week. Ireland's engagement with all partners, including the United States, has consistently focused on the obligation of all states to comply with their obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law. And this was a key message conveyed by the Taoiseach to President Biden in March of this year and remains a central focus of our ongoing engagement with the United States. Consistent with concerns that I have been raising for several months, there is a growing body of reporting and evidence indicating that breaches of international humanitarian law by both Hamas and Israel are continuing with impunity. The International Court of Justice has ordered Israel to immediately halt its military offensive and any other action in the Rafah governorate, which may inflict on the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life that could bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. The ICJ has also ordered Israel to open the Rafah crossing to allow for the entry of humanitarian aid, and it's therefore incumbent upon all of our partners, including the United States, to consider their obligations and responsibilities under international humanitarian law. And in my view, weaponry should not be sent to Israel until we have an immediate humanitarian ceasefire.
Well, Tánaiste, international law has gone out the door. I mean, international law has gone out the door. In the last 10 months, over 45,000 people have been murdered by the Israeli state, including 15,000 children. It's hard to believe. And you know what we see daily on our news screens is almost impossible to comprehend. This is akin to what the Nazis were doing in occupied Europe. And you know, Joe Biden was welcomed with open arms in this country, in some ways embarrassingly, but his hands are dripping with blood, because 70% of all arms that go to the state of Israel is coming from the United States. 25% is from Germany, and the rest is from elsewhere. So the bombs that are raining down on children have nothing to do with this conflict, are being made in the USA and are killing innocent people. This is a state, you know, America called it the land of the free. Yes, they stand for out and out destruction of the people of Palestine. How can this government, you know, stand and make a stand against what's happening in Gaza?
I think, first of all, there's no doubt that there's been breaches of international humanitarian law, and it continues on a systemic basis by Israel and by Hamas. And I note that you haven't called out Hamas in your comments, and I think you should, because they could also lay down arms right now, and they could contribute very significantly to a ceasefire, and they could release the hostages. And we need to be as equally strong in calling on Hamas to lay down their arms and to release the hostages. It's unconscionable that people going about their daily lives are captured and put in and taken as hostages in situations like this. There is, and in terms of the humanitarian law, the Commission of Inquiry report by the UN Human Rights Office, the Volker Turk report, confirms what you have said, Deputy, and others, in terms of the and it's a presentation of the Human Rights Council in terms of the violation and reported continued breaches of international humanitarian law and international human rights law by all parties. And likewise, that has been confirmed further by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. He published a detailed report on the 19th of June, which strongly indicates that the Israeli Defence Forces have systematically failed to comply with several fundamental principles of international humanitarian law in its conduct of the hostilities in Gaza since the 7th of October.
I want to see all hostages released. We all want to see peace and a settlement in the Middle East. And you know, you may not agree with this, but those that are resisting Israeli occupation, whether that's in Gaza or the West Bank, have a right to engage with the Israeli Defence Forces. You know, they have a right because they're being occupied, they're being murdered, and they've been slaughtered. I mean, this is an incredible statistic, but since October the 7th, $23 billion of American armaments have gone to Israel. It's unbelievable. We've never seen the likes of this since World War II. The level of destruction. Bombs, 2,000-pound bombs being put in suburban areas. The use of phosphorus in South Lebanon. These are war crimes against ordinary people. So how can the civilised world, including Ireland, stand and say, look, we can do nothing about this? We can do nothing. Of course we can do something. Have you spoke to your counterpart from the United States? Have you spoke to the US ambassador here to say, look, this destruction has to stop? It's not in our name. This is, we want peace and we want the settlement to this issue.
I've condemned repeatedly the bombardment of Gaza, and we in Ireland have taken a number of steps in terms of moving towards a pathway, a political pathway, and also towards a ceasefire. And we've worked with the Arab partners, with Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the Palestinian Authority, Jordan, Qatar and others to try and develop a peace process and a proper peace initiative. And they have published that, and we've engaged with them and also with the European Union in terms of getting that advanced, and also then supporting the humanitarian side of the equation. Quite effectively, actually, Ireland has, in terms of UNRWA and in terms of support for the Palestinian Authority and Prime Minister Mustafa. And we've also worked with and engaged with the Americans in terms of that ceasefire and that political approach. This is a complex issue that goes back, as you know, well back decades. There has been a historic link between the United States and Israel. We may not agree with that unconditional support that flows from the United States to Israel. Likewise, some European Union states have historic connections because of what happened in World War II.
Thank you,
but that, in our view, the prism through which people view this in the current context should be through the prism of international humanitarian law, and Ireland has been very steadfast in supporting the courts and upholding their jurisdiction.